Hey guys, tonight we wander through narrow, overly crowded alleys of Jerusalem in 1119, where spilled goat milk covers cobblestones and the call to prayer tangles with Latin hymns. You probably won't survive this reality check. These knights in white cloaks are more terrified of dysentery than any hovering Saracen archer. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop your location and local time in the comments so I know where you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge dusty streets alongside ragged pilgrims. The scent of burnt frankincense drifting from makeshift chapels. Flames reflect off ancient stones warmed by the afternoon sun. Your sandals grind over pebbles as you approach an unassuming compound near the Temple Mount. This is no ordinary lodging house. It's the genesis of a brotherhood that will shape medieval Bajura. Founded in 1119 by French knight Hugh de Payens and 8 companions, the poor Knights of Christ take solemn vows under a tapestry of star-faded silk. Their oaths echo off sandstone walls: poverty, chastity, obedience. Mainstream historians agree this modest start officially commences. The Knights Templar order. Historians still argue whether they were as poor as the name implies, given the patronage they soon received from Baldwin II of Jerusalem. Inside the candlelit hall, you lean in to hear half-whispered chants in broken Latin. The hush is broken only by the scratch of quill on parchment. Recording that first rule penned by Bernard of Clairvaux, man with more theological clout than a dozen bishops combined. Fringe lore claims Bernard secretly added an encoded cross symbol that only Templars could decipher, hinting at arcane geometry beyond our ken. As you settle on a rough-hewn bench, you notice stripped shields hung like trophies. Each bears a plain red cross. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some say that the Red Cross wasn't just a symbol of martyrdom, but was mixed from powdered dragon's blood. An alchemical exaggeration uttered in drunken taverns outside town. Yet the stark simplicity remains an enduring icon, worn over white wool surcoats. The air vibrates with the low hum of a zither. It's played by a troubadour who uses camel bone picks. Its melancholy tune feels almost modern, like a minor key lullaby you'd hum on a sleepless flight. You twitch when he strikes a sour note, some medieval version of an airline in-flight announcement. Sunlight slants through narrow windows, dust dancing like lazy dervishes in beams you half expect to taste. Sweat beads on your brow as the knights step forward to pledge their lives, hands brushing the cold stone of the temple's ancient foundations. Remember, those stones were once part of Solomon's temple lore, so some chronicles contend, though historians still argue whether any fragment remains in situ. A squire nudges you aside. It's knocking over a chipped ceramic cup. It clatters against the floor, startling a black cat that darts under a bench. Do you think cats in medieval chapels are odd? Fringe sources insist these Templar cats were trained to guard treasures. Though that sounds like a bedtime story for tourists. Your throat is parched. You gulp from a leather flask passed around. It reeks of sour grape, probably watered down, criminally watered down. In the corner, a knight laces up scuffed leather sandals, humming an early variation of O Come, Emmanuel. That tune will survive centuries, warping into every Christmas movie soundtrack. But right now, it's just a sleepy chant, echoing off arches. Outside, bells clang. You step into midday glare to watch a small procession. Knights trudge behind a cross-shaped banner, armor clinking like wind chimes on a blustery day. A light breeze carries the promise of danger. Saladin's forces are ever patient beyond the city walls. Mainstream accounts note that Muslim and Christian emissaries sporadically negotiate truces. Yet historians still argue whether early Templar neutrality pacts ever truly protected pilgrims. You sniff at the acrid smell of pitch. Barrels waiting to seal armor joints. Someone nearby jokes that these knights could be mistaken for touring construction workers. What with all that protective gear and tools? That's your second joke, so I owe you a third. If they charged a toll to pass through this checkpoint, do you think they'd accept camels as credit? Unlikely, but maybe they'd invoice you in hammered silver dot as dusk settles. You linger by a fountain trickling with water borrowed from a well older than your worst hangover. The tower guard's silhouette stretches long across the plaza. You realize you're witnessing the raw inception of an order sworn to defend pilgrims, yet poised to amass wealth rivaling any royal treasury. It's the birth of an enigma, cloaked in white and red. With that, you step back into the alleys, the cries of merchants fading in the distance. You're left with the image of those inaugural knights kneeling beneath the setting sun, their vow ringing out across limestone lanes. And that, my friend, is where our journey begins. You slip through a narrow archway into a cloister wrapped in pre-dawn hush, where the air is thick with incense that stings your throat like a promise of penance. Tiny candles flicker along stone corbels, their dancing lights casting spidery shadows that twist across vaulted ceilings. You trace the grooves of worn flagstones beneath your boots, feeling centuries of devout footsteps imprinting a silent rhythm. The monastery's heartbeat is a low chant, Laus Deo, Laus Deo, rolling across arches in a warm baritone tide that feels as ancient as the stones themselves. In this dim chamber, you glimpse the austere code that binds these warrior monks. The rule formally approved at the Council of Troyes in 1129 under Bernard of Clairvaux's guidance. It lays out strict poverty, chastity, and obedience, and demands that each brother pray 8 times daily, lifting rosaries that click in solemn unison. Mainstream historians note that this rule set the Templars apart by blending cloistered devotion with martial discipline, an unprecedented experiment in monastic militarism. Historians still argue whether they ever truly upheld every vow. Given the growing wealth that later flowed back to their mother house, you crouch to read faded lines, etched into a hand-copied parchment perched on a stone lectern. The ink smells faintly metallic, like damp forests after a thunderstorm. Legend has it that Jacques de Malle, the last Grand Master centuries later, penned a secret supplement to this rule, one that included cryptic verses about secret oaths whispered behind locked doors. Fringe lore insists those verses were encoded in musical notation, so only brothers versed in chant could decipher them beneath the chapel's vaults. A brief hiccup of coughing echoes from behind you. A novice, still hoarse from last night's vigil of psalms, clears his throat theatrically. You half expect him to ask for a throat lozenge or a spot on the Templar Yelp page. Instead, he offers you a scrap of vellum, inscribed with a scratched symbol, a red cross enclosed in a 7-sided star. He winks. Some say it's an alchemical cipher pointing to hidden treasure. Others claim it's his own doodle from boredom. Either way, you pocket it, wondering if it'll spice up your next Instagram story. The low chant swells as a senior brother steps forward, its white cloak brushing the cold flagstones. Its voice resonates, filling the hall with a lullaby of Latin, syllables that seems to hum in your bones. You feel hypnotized, as if the chant is less prayer than subtle mind control, an idea some fringe writers relish, insisting the Templars used rhythmic incantations to cement loyalty and induce trance-like states. Skeptics scoff, but historians still argue whether these chants served purely spiritual ends or doubled as psychological tools. Your stomach growls. It's just past dawn, and the rule dictates a simple meal of barley bread and lentil soup. You follow a line of brothers through a narrow passage into the refectory, where long wooden tables stand like regimented soldiers awaiting orders. Oil. Lanterns hang from iron hooks, their glow revealing rough-hewn benches polished smooth by countless elbows. You snag the last crumb of bread, half expecting an earthenware bowl to be served with spinach so bitter it could strip paint. Over soup, you overhear a brother debating the merits of chainmail versus brigandine. One insists that mail bends more fluidly in the saddle. The other swears brigandine plates save weight and reduce chafing under the armpits. You pipe up, "Has anyone tried Kevlar?" Silence. They stare. You shrug and mumble about modern convenience, mentally awarding yourself your first joke of the morning. You deserve a gold star. Or at least a pat on the back, though you suspect the Templar code forbids self-congratulation after the meal. You follow behind monks bearing heavy tomes into a cramped scriptorium. The air here is musty with parchment and fermented apple cider that someone left too close to a desk. Quills scratch fiercely as copyists transcribe prayers, glossing and illuminating text margins with tiny sketches of mythical beasts. One manuscript features a dragon wearing a red cross, apparently captioned, "Spiritual foe, no one." You stifle a laugh if only the crusading knights could face their psychological dragons as easily as they did Saracen armies. Your guide approaches, a narrow spiral staircase carved into the chapel's thickness. You ascend, pausing on each step to feel the stone's chill seep through your boots. From above, the chant is a fading hum, replaced by the clank of armor rehearsals in the courtyard. A cool breeze drifts through an arrow slit, carrying faint hints of rosewater, probably from the Sisters of the Hospital of St. John across town. You wonder if those hospitallers get a better muslin tea blend at the parapet's edge. You lean on the balustrade, watching shafts of pale morning light slice across the inner courtyard. Knights in half armor pace in formation, practicing sword drills with wooden replicas that splinter on impact. One knight misses and smacks himself in the thigh, yelping as if he's unexpectedly discovered a new kind of pain. That's your second joke. You're keeping count. Perhaps next you can joke about their Wi-Fi signal being stronger in the chapel than here. Though monastic life probably doesn't include TikTok breaks. You slide back down. The chant resurrecting as a trio of priests begins Vespers rehearsals in the lower chapel. The acoustics turn their voices into a washing machine of sound soothing. It's disorienting and just loud enough that you start questioning your last decision. Eating that lentil soup, to clamp your hands over your ears for a moment, like trying to mute an overly dramatic movie trailer. A scholar nearby whispers that the space was intentionally built for sonic resonance, designed to elevate devotion and intimidate intruders. Historians still argue whether acoustics shaped medieval ecclesiastical architecture more than aesthetics did. Descending into the crypt, you feel a shift in temperature, cooler, damper, and scented with old earth. Flickering sconces reveal curved buttresses that cradle sculpt-shaped stones carved to ward off evil spirits. You catch your reflection in a puddle, pale face, wide eyes, and a gooseberry drizzle of sweat where your helmet sat. You're oddly comforted, like spotting someone else in a group. Therapy session for time travel trauma. A final chant echoes through the vault. Ora pro nobis. Ora pro nobis. You close your eyes, letting the words wash over you like waves on a moonlit beach. That's your third joke avoided. No need to ask if ora pro nobis means order more nachos. Some things defy even sleepy sarcasm. You emerge into midday brightness, the chant's now distant murmurs. The rule strictures linger in your mind like a half-remembered dream. This brotherhood is bound by ritual as much as steel. You pat your sword's pommel, half expecting it to whisper secret addendums tucked away by Damal himself. Whether those hidden verses exist or not. The monastic code shapes every breath these knights take, part prayer, part sword stroke, and entirely bound to the mystery that cloaks their order. You drift from the scriptorium's fading chants into the courtyard's dappled light, where Templars pause between drills to adjust their surcoats. The fabric gleams white as fresh snow at dawn, a smooth canvas for the scarlet cross stitched squarely on each heart. You reach out, fingertips grazing the coarse wool, scratchy, a bit itchy, but remarkably crisp given the order's vow of poverty. The dye smells faintly metallic, like oversteeped tea with an iron spoon, warming your nostrils and tugging you back to that smoky dye house by the docks. Mainstream accounts credit Pope Eugenius III's 1145 bull for formally granting the Templars the right to wear that simple red cross over white tan official badge, distinguishing them from other crusading knights. It's meant to symbolize martyrdom and purity, the red for blood, the white for the spotless soul. You can almost hear the papal scribe's quill scratching out the decree, a flourish of Latin that echoes through Vatican halls even now. Historians still argue whether the cross was adopted solely as a branding tool or if it grew organically from battlefield necessity. Where glinting steel needed a clear foil against dusty chainmail, you sidle up to a dyer's bench where a young brother stirs a cauldron of cochineal beetles ground into paste. He glances up, cheeks flushed with heat, and hums a tune that could have been piped through a modern coffee shop playlist. Fringe lore claims those beetles came from a secret Templar colony in the New World long before Columbus, where knights cultivated crimson pigments in hidden jungle vales. You raise an eyebrow. It's the sort of story that spices up late night tavern chats but strains credulity by dawn's sober light. Leaning in, you note the cross's patty form, arms spreading wide at the ends. Some records suggest early crosses had straight edges, evolving later into this flared design for better visibility on banners and shields. Oddly, a handful of manuscripts depict it with flirtatious tips, an ornamental flourish some claim was borrowed from French court fashion. Historians still argue whether these variations reflect deliberate symbolism or simply the whims of local tailors lacking a clear style guide. You finger a small, half-embroidered cross on a discarded surcoat at your feet, probably a novice's practice piece. The stitches are uneven, like someone learning guitar chords for the first time. A brother nearby jokes that if you wear it backwards, you might accidentally bless your enemies instead of the faithful. That's your first joke. So buckle up for two more somewhere before we hit the 1,000-word mark. A breeze drifts through, carrying the faint temps of smeared pitch where armorer's seal plate overlaps. Under your palm, the surcoat's wool shifts, and you catch the ghost of a soldier's sweat and incense. The contrast feels oddly intimate, like glimpsing a knight's heartbeat laid bare. No one around pays you much mind. Here, everyone's cloak is identical anonymity by design. You wonder if that was the point all along, to erase individuality, forging a collective identity stronger than the stiffest mail, hauberk. At the far end of the courtyard, a sergeant pins a fresh cross onto a new initiate's cloak. The cloth is brighter, almost startlingly white, as if it's never seen a speck of dirt or battle's mud. He gently presses the patch, fingers smudged red with leftover dye. You can't help but smirk at the idea of a Templar patch test failure. Sorry, Brother Giles, your cross came out pink. Come back when you can handle real dye. That's joke number 2. Imagine the baptism by color correction. Nearby, you overhear two historians quibbling over the cross's chromatic politics. One insists the red dye was deliberately inexpensive, made from cheap ochre mixed with iron filings. The other counters that rigorous accounts and royal ledgers record shipments of fine kermes dye imported from Sicily at great expense. Historians still argue whether the cheaper, locally sourced pigments were ever substituted en masse to save Templar coffers. You almost applaud their dedication to medieval fiscal policy. Your gaze drifts upward to pennant stripes at the battlements, each bearing the same cross in silk banner form. A light wind causes them to snap and flutter, a rhythmic dance that sets your mind buzzing. You imagine the banners from a distance, looking like patches of blood on ivory, visible across dusty plains. A fringe theory claims Templars designed the cross precisely to dazzle camel-stricken enemy mounts into thinking their caravan carried limitless caravans of salt, halting them in confusion. You chuckle. It's fringe madness, but weirdly plausible if you've ever tried pacifying an ornery camel. With a lazy stretch, you lean against the cool stone of the outer wall, fingertips brushing tiny chips in the carved Maltese crosses that decorate the battlements. Those are probably later additions, bureaucratic cross-pollination from Hospitaller architecture. Some scholars argue that early Templar fortresses lacked ornamentation, relying solely on the surcoat cross for identification. Historians still argue whether the architectural crosses were added for morale or merely aesthetic, copy-paste from more flamboyant orders. The morning sun climbs higher, glinting off helmets polished until they resemble flat mirrors. You catch a flash of red on white in your peripheral vision and spin around to spot a knight jogging across the courtyard, brandishing a practiced spear. His own cross seems to wobble on his heart as he leaps to parry an invisible foe. You wince? When you imagine him crashing into someone and knitting a cricket-like Bruce third joke locked in, suddenly, a pair of scribes wheels a cart laden with fresh linen surcoats into position. They unhook them, laying them out like sacrificial altar cloths. You lean in close enough to see the linen's fine weave, far softer than the coarse wool you've been petting. Luxury imports, one scribe murmurs to another apparently. Reserved for higher-ranking brothers. You swallow a laugh. Even within an order that values poverty, there's tiered fabric economics as you drift away from the cart. Sun's warmth intensifies, making the white cloaks appear almost luminescent. You squint, imagining the Templars marching in column, their crosses glowing like beacons. Legend holds that in the dark of night, knights applied phosphorescent coatings to their cross just to spook approaching armies. Fringe sources love that. One, though any historian with a straight face will tell you glow-in-the-dark paint wasn't a 12th century thing. Then again, historians still argue whether rudimentary alchemical powders could produce faint luminescence under moonlight. The wind shifts, carrying smells of oven-baked bread and roasting meat from the refectory. Time ticks on each stitch, each banner, each pennant reinforcing the order's visual identity. More than just a battlefield marker, the cross becomes a unifying brand. A silent contract binding all who wear it to a shared destiny of peril and purpose. You run a finger along your own loosely tied surcoat sash. Pretending you're about to fasten a cross of your own design, maybe a yellow smiley face. Because why not subvert expectations? A distant bell clangs, calling knights back to formation. You straighten, brushing stray lint from your sleeve. The courtyard hum fades into coordinated footfalls and the scrape of armor. Your final glance lingers on the far wall, where the faded ghost of an even older cross etched directly into stone erupts through centuries of wear. It reminds you that symbols evolve, layered like sediment, and even the most iconic red cross has a hidden history nobody's fully unraveled. So you step forward, surcoat swaying around your calves, ready for the next drill. The red cross beats against your chest, a quiet drum echoing vows of service, sacrifice, and secrecy. Whether its meaning was purely martial, deeply spiritual, or tinged with alchemical mischief, nobody can say for certain. Historians still argue. Whether it was the cross on the cloak or the minds of the knights beneath that made the Templars legendary. You slip through a low stone arch into a vaulted chamber where coin-laden ledgers teeter on oaken tables. The air here is cool, tinged with a sharp clang of metal on stone and the faint scent of iron-tinted coinage mixed with beeswax from ceiling. Wax drippings. Your boots echo against the flagstones as you approach a long marble counter, carved with fading Templar crosses that have witnessed exchange after exchange. You don't see bullion piled high like a dragon's hoard, but neat rows of wooden chests labeled with fleur-de-lis in smudged ink. It's a sight both orderly and slightly nerve-wracking. It's like finding out your friendly neighborhood. Your bank holds more secrets than your cluttered sock drawer. A brother in a simple surcoat greets you with a curt nod. He lifts a quill from a pewter inkwell, its nib glinting like a tiny sword, and jots your name in a leather-bound ledger. This is no mere guest house. By the mid-12th century, the Templars have become medieval finance pioneers. It's offering safe deposit vaults and letters of credit for wary pilgrims. It's journeying from Genoa or Paris. Mainstream historians credit them as forerunners of modern banking, since a pilgrim could deposit coinage in Jerusalem and withdraw equivalent funds in Acre or Cyprus, avoiding bandits and those pesky high seas pirates. Historians still argue whether this service constituted true banking or merely an elaborate pawnshop scheme cloaked in robes. You slide a small purse across the counter, its coins clinking softly. The brother presses a seal of red wax embossed, with a twin-headed eagle on the parchment. You lean in, fingertips grazing the stamped emblem, and feel the chill of the cool desk stone beneath. A low murmur drifts in from a side chamber where novices tally receipts with bone-handled abacuses, beads clicking like somber metronomes. France-sourced silver mingles with Spanish gold. Each chest represents a network stretching from Lisbon to Antioch. It's oddly thrilling to realize your spare florins might fund a crusade on one end and pay for a Byzantine mosaic on the other. Your stomach rumbles. You glance at a small window slit high above that slants in midday light, illuminating. Shelves lined with clay jars of dried herbs and apothecary stash, in case a ledger keeper suffers a headache from too much number crunching. A robed brother trudges into view, balancing a tray loaded with tankards of watered-down red wine and chunks of stale bread. You accept a cup, grimacing at the fungal bouquet. This is the medieval version of budget catering. You joke aloud. If we had an ATM here, I'd probably be waiting behind a goat. The brother doesn't laugh, but you suspect a ghost of a smile beneath his stoic oath at a nearby desk. A scribe gently unwinds a scroll stamped with a wax seal and early promissory note, guaranteeing your withdrawal rights. Fringe sources insist. These promissory notes contained microscopic astrological diagrams, guiding travelers by star patterns scribbled in invisible ink. You squint, imagining a secret Templar GPS scribbled onto vellum. Turn north by Polaris, then follow the scent of roasting mutton. It's the sort of tale that spices up late-night conspiracy podcasts, yet plausibly medieval enough to keep you wide-eyed, pulling the scroll free. You note the elaborate Templar cipher engraved beneath your name, tiny triangles and dots yielding their meaning only when folded just so. According to fringe lore, some knights embedded hidden maps to lost treasures in such ciphers, but practical purposes likely prevailed, ensuring no forger could slip through with a counterfeit letter. Still, you can't help but trace the faint embossing with your fingertip, wondering if you're literally holding a puzzle that could lead to untold riches or at least a very confused merchant. Across the room, senior brother supervises a pair of novices as they weigh gold marks on a brass scale. The metals glint in the torchlight, a hypnotic dance of yellow and gray. One novice misplaces a weight, and you quip, "You know, this isn't on the stock market, right?" He looks embarrassed, cheeks coloring under his tonsure. You chuckle your second joke while the senior brother grunts approval at your quick wit. He mutters that clerical humor is rarer than a spotless ledger. And you tuck that away for your inevitable medieval stand-up routine. Your gaze drifts upward to oak beams, etched with tally marks, deposits and withdrawals, tallied like battalions, marched and countermarched. Underneath those marks, you spot a crudely carved symbol, a coiled serpent biting its tail. Fringe hypothesis claims this Ouroboros signals an inner circle of banker knights who lent money at interest rates veiled in pious rhetoric. That sounds suspiciously like charging rent on righteousness, but you'll leave the deep theological debate to scholars. Historians still argue whether the Templars quietly charged interest despite canonical prohibitions against usury. You step closer to examine the coffer lids, each painted with a bold cross and labeled with a city name: Bari, Montpellier, Antioch. A soft breeze drifts in, stirring the seals. It carries a faint promise of sea air and salt, reminding you that these funds flow across the Mediterranean's sinewy trade routes. You imagine the crossing from Acre to Cyprus, a creaking wooden hull, shrieking, and a brother handing you a parchment promising you 50 silver bezants in St. John d'Acre. You'd probably tip your hat if you had one. But these helmets aren't exactly designed for convenient headwear. Behind you, a door creaks open, revealing a small office where a map is spread across a desk. You step in, catching your reflection in a polished goblet, wide-eyed, slightly sweaty, and thoroughly mesmerized. A brother points to red lines tracing caravan routes from Damascus to Tripoli, highlighting safe houses maintained by the order. He explains that depositors could even leave letters of credit for merchants. Without Templar backing, trade caravans risked robbery, and you wouldn't want to hitch your wares to a bandit's mule, would you? A dusty wind blows through, scattering loose parchment. You catch one slip, a half-finished receipt noting a deposit of 12 marks and a cryptic addendum: guard against the Black Rider. You slide it back onto the desk, musing that maybe they meant Saracen raiders. But it sounds like the world's worst subscription service. Sign up for Templar banking, get free existential dread. There's your third joke, because even in a serious vault chamber, can't resist a bedtime quip. As you exit, you run a hand along the smooth marble edge of the counter. The chamber's hush yields to the courtyard's clamor chants, and hammer strikes echoing in the distance. You pocket your promissory note, parchment crinkling like a promise unfolding in your palm. Outside, the sun glints off stone battlements, each cross above reminding you that for every coin safeguarded here, the order's reach grew deeper into Christendom's veins. Walking away, you imagine caravans laden with spices and silks, relying on this system, ledgers acting as bridges between continents long before the Renaissance's goldsmith bankers stole the show. Whether the Templar banking model was the first true institution or an elaborate clerical workaround, it reshaped economies and pilgrim routes alike. Historians still argue whether their financial innovations sealed the order's fate by making them too powerful, or merely funded the defense of the Holy Land. You pause at the threshold, the faint click of a sealed chest echoing behind you. Even with your modest purse tucked away, the scent of polished coin and worn leather lingers on your fingertips. You trudge back into the sunlit courtyard, mind buzzing with digits, seals, and whispered conspiracy theories, convinced that if medieval ATMs existed, you'd never look at banking the same way again. You slip through a broad stone portal into what looks like the skeleton of a half-forgotten cloister, where shafts of pale light pierce through arched windows and dust motes drift like tiny slow-motion snowflakes. Your boots crunch over broken tiles in the central garth as you follow the carved pilasters lining the walkways. Each arch bears an uncanny flourish, a hidden glyph here. A barely perceptible spiral, they're etched into weathered sandstone so lightly that you almost doubt your eyes. You crouch and run your fingertips across a carved rose window, feeling grooves worn smooth by centuries of pilgrims who sought solace or secrets in this quiet sanctuary. Mainstream historians agree that the Templars were master builders, combining Cistercian austerity with the latest military engineering to erect fortresses like Chateau Pellerin and the Round Church at Tomar. Those austere, circular sanctuaries owe their design to Jerusalem's Church of the Holy Sepulchre, echoing its rotunda in miniature. Historians still argue whether these churches served purely devotional purposes or doubled as secret meeting halls where knights exchanged coded messages beneath cloister vaults. You trace the underside of an archway, discovering a faintly carved serpent coiled around a sword hilt, so shallow you'd miss it if you blinked. Fringe lore insists these subtle emblems are talismans warding off evil spirits, invisible to the uninitiated eye. Some conspiracy mavens even claim that each glyph forms part of a hidden map, pointing to subterranean vaults packed with relics and lost gospel fragments. You suppress a Grin legacy treasure hunts for the upteenth time, and nobody's found more than a damp alcove and a handful of rat droppings overhead. A gaggle of swallows skitters through a shaft of sunshine. There, high-pitched chirps blending with the distant scrape of trowels and hammers as restoration work hums on. A foreman in a neon vest gives you a curious look, as if you just stepped out of a VR medieval tour. You raise a hand in greeting and joke. Don't worry, I left my electric drill at home. It's your first joke, so pat yourself on. The back-no medieval contractor wants to endure a quest for a 9-volt battery in Jerusalem. Your gaze drifts to a series of slender columns supporting an intricately ribbed vault. Each rib ends in a boss carved with a unique symbol. One shows a dragon's head, another a chalice, a third a star encircled by a ring of dots. These bosses once supported painted polychrome decoration, now long faded. Fringe enthusiasts love to argue that the bosses encode astrological charts used by Templar initiates to determine auspicious battle dates. Whether those dates truly guided military campaigns remains a point of contention. Historians still argue whether medieval knights ever cared more about star alignments than raw steel and numbers, leaning against a centuries-old bench. You notice? Tiny holes drilled discreetly into the stone's perfect circles, spaced at precise intervals. Someone whispers that these were mounting points for sliding panels concealing secret alcoves, perhaps hiding documents or even forbidden idols. You lean in, half expecting the stones to swing open like a pizza oven door, revealing a clandestine room stocked with scrolls and old coffee grounds. It's your second joke. You're already on a roll. A sudden breeze rattles the massive wooden doors at the cloister's entrance. Outside, the afternoon sun glints off distant battlements. You wander down a narrow corridor where a line of capitals carved with leafy vines gives way to geometric patterns so exact they seem computer-generated. Legend says the Templars possessed arcane knowledge borrowed from Solomon's temple or passed down by Crusader mystics that allowed them to master sacred geometry. Scholars still argue whether this was genuine architectural innovation or simply the era's prevailing Gothic style taken to new extremes. You crouch before a wall, panel decorated with a series of tiny crosses, each pecked into the stone in a pattern reminiscent of Braille. A genial guide claims these aren't just decorative. They're a rudimentary cipher recording the names of knights who died defending the cloister. You squint, as if deciphering an 800-year-old captcha. When nothing obvious pops out, you mutter. Maybe they were Templar hieroglyphics for BRB. It's gone to fight Saracens. That's your third joke. And by now, you're starting to suspect modern humor is your secret weapon against the tyranny of silent stones. Moving on. You step into a dimly lit chapel annex where a dozen deformed faces peer from column capitals grotesques that look half human, half beast. Their wide, empty eyes follow you as you pass, and you feel a tingle of nerves like locking eyes with a gargoyle during last call at 2 a.m. Fringe Tales. Insist those grotesques depict Gnostic spirits banished by the Templars, carved as warding icons to trap spiritual parasites. Some experts scoff, pointing to similar motifs across Europe as mere decorative flourish. Historians still argue whether Templar grotesques held theological weight or were just Gothic fun. A thin stream of daylight falls onto a worn mosaic of colored tiles embedded in the floor beneath the altar. Muddy reds, faded blues, and ghostly whites form an intricate rosette pattern. You lean in and spot the faint outline of a serpentine figure winding through the petals long enough to suggest a hidden river motif. You wonder if it symbolizes the Jordan's course, or if it's a playful labyrinth meant to keep viewers' eyes busy during lengthy sermons. Either way, it's mesmerizing like a medieval kaleidoscope. The muffled clang of restoration hammers resumes, and you step back into the curving ambulatory. You glance upward, half expecting to see a hidden chamber above the vault. Legend claims Templars carved false ceilings to conceal stashes of ritual objects, silver trumpets, sacred scrolls, maybe even portions of the true cross. You jokingly run your hand along the lower vault rib, mumbling "Open Sesame," fully expecting a stone vault to swing outward. It doesn't shame that would have made the day. As you circle back toward the main cloister walk, you notice a pair of twin staircases spiraling in opposite directions, one clockwise, the other counterclockwise. A sign explains the choice wasn't random. One led to service areas like the kitchen and granary. The other ascended to private chapels. Fringe authors argue the opposing spirals symbolize duality, action and contemplation, reflecting the Templars' dual role as monks and warriors. Skeptics counter that practical space constraints dictated the design. Historians still argue whether symbolic meaning guided Templar staircase planning. You pause atop one staircase to watch afternoon light pour through a rose window framing a stylized lamb bearing a flag. The colored glass glows like stained glass. Smartphone screens from a modern church tour. You lean on the cold stone balustrade and joke. If they had Snapchat filters back then, every Templar would be a glowing lamb. You snort at your own joke, realizing medieval knights probably preferred real swords to virtual badges. Descending back into the cloister's lap, you note the cool hush, the rhythmic drip of water from a small fountain in the center, the soft flutter of dove wings overhead, and your own breath echoing in stone corridors. You run your hand along carved capitals one more time, searching for a final hidden glyph. Instead, you find a small, nearly invisible inscription reading 1693, the date of a later repair. Even after centuries, these stones keep surprising. You step out into the golden afternoon light, leaving cloister secrets behind like breadcrumbs in a forest. The carved glyphs may hint at Templar mysteries, or they may simply be the marks of countless craftsmen across generations. Whether these architectural clues conceal true secrets or are merely decorative, historians still argue with fervor matched only by their admiration. And you, for one, are left wondering what other whispers hide in these walls, waiting for someone bold enough and maybe a bit foolish to trace every groove with their fingertips. You trudge across cracked earth, baking under Saladin's relentless sun, the horizon wavy like a mirage in a desert heat mirror. The air shimmers with dust and the acrid scent of scorched grass where the Crusader camp once spat up, flickering flames. Sweat beads on your forehead, dribbling into your eyes and stinging like a vindictive teacher's chalk. Smoke curls from nearby wagons, the charred wood scent mixing with the sour tank of metal heated too long. You taste grit on your lips, dust from the ground, soot from campfires, and the unmistakable metallic tang of fear. By July 4th, 1187. The Templar garrison on the Horns of Hattin has formed ranks against Saladin's forces. Mainstream historians note that the order's Grand Master, Gerard de Rydefort, led over 200 knights and hundreds of sergeants into battle that day. Drawn out by the Muslim armies, feigned withdrawals, and cut off from water sources around the nearby springs. Historians still argue whether the decision to engage uphill stemmed from miscommunication among commanders or from overzealous Zelsome claim. De Rydefort ignored wiser counsel from fellow nobles. You stumbled toward a battered war banner pinned to a splintered wagon wheel, its red cross sullied with sweat, dust, and a smear of blood. Remember that pristine cross on your surcoat? It's now a dirty blotch, reminding you that symbolism sometimes crumbles faster than stone under siege. A stray camel that wandered into the melee braes mournfully, its hump shuddering. Someone cracks a dry joke. I hope they don't invoice us for camel repair, which would be the medieval equivalent of a ridiculous bank fee. That's your first joke, delivered dry as burnt lentil flour. Your throat scratches, no water for hours. Just the phantom splash of distant springs, taunting your parched lungs. You recall the Templar banking vault back in Acre, where you sipped meager wine to wash down stale bread. Here, the promise of credit notes means nothing when thirst drives brother to betray brother over a single skin of water. Fringe rumor insists that some knights carried vials of powdered crystal lotus, an alchemical anti-thirst concoction gleaned from Arabian scribes. You imagine sprinkling it into your canteen and hallucinating a 5-star spa definitely. A fringe recipe, but one you'd try if it came with a money-back guarantee. Ahead, horses' hooves clatter against stone fragments scattered over the field like broken chalk in a schoolyard. Knights in half-armor charge, lances leveled, faces glinting with desperation. You catch a glimpse of a Templar knight whose visor is stuck. So he rears his horse to lift it off his face, clearly the cavalry version of a stuck seatbelt at 30,000 feet. It's your second joke, and you nearly choke on dust laughing. The crescendo of arrows thunders as Saladin's archers rain fire-hardened shafts down upon the Crusader line. Some knights raise their shields, but the volley is too dense. The wood crackles under impact. You flinch when one arrow pierces the shield by your side, quivering like a tongue-tasting betrayal. The banner above you quivers, then folds as the wagon wheel snaps in two. Dust spirals upward in a ghostly helix, and you feel a moment's vertigo battlefield. Vertigo, courtesy of 1,000 frantic feet stamping soil. Men shout cries of Deus low volt, but their voices crack under the sun's pressure, echoing as half-hearted pleas. You dodge a clattering mace that smacks into a discarded helmet, sending it spinning like a golf ball gone wrong. You wonder if medieval knights had mulligans. Spoiler, they did not. That's your third joke, delivered just before a sergeant yanks you behind a battered shield wall, inside that fragile fortress of interlocking shields. The heat is oppressive. Breaths come in ragged gulps, and the shield's inner wood reeks of sweat-soaked mail and incense residue from morning prayers, an odd fragrance you'd pay real money to avoid today. You press your cheek against the shield's rim, peeking through a slit at Saladin's cavalry swarming the flanks. Their armor gleams like polished bronze coins. Rumor has it some knights claimed these plates were dusted with crushed pearls for added sheen-fringed nonsense, but the battlefield loves a good bit of theater. Suddenly, a rider breaks through the lines, bearing down on the standard. Sparks fly as steel meets steel. You spring aside, heart hammering like someone playing drums at full volume in a cathedral. The rider's horse whinnies, nostrils flaring, as its rider rips the banner free and holds it aloft like a grotesque trophy. A hush falls over your small circle of knights, where seconds stretch into lifetimes. In that stillness, you realize what defeat tastes like: ash, dust, and regret. No sip of Quantum Lotus can mask this flavor. Around you, the Templar line begins to buckle. Knights fight valiantly, swords flashing, horses panicking, some bite at swirling dust. Others rear and collapse, taking their rider with them. You watch. A brother in polished helm catch an arrow in his throat, collapsing to his knees like an extinguished candle. You want to look away, but can't. It's a raw lesson when your armor's not enough. Faith is your final shield. Then comes the horna, low, trembling note that reverberates across the plain. Saladin's forces cheer, a sound both triumphant and surprisingly melodic, reverberating off hills like a perverse lullaby. Some survivors drop their weapons, eyes hollow, and kneel under the blazing noon sky. Others charge with mad energy, preferring fiery death to the shame of surrender. You find cover behind a shattered trebuchet, its wooden arms snapped and splintered like careless kindling. Shrapnel from its stone projectiles litters the ground, and you step over chunks of granite, the size of small boulders. You close your eyes, willing the scene away, but the clang of metal and anguished cries linger in your skull. Somewhere behind you, a crusader priest prays in eloquent Latin, voice cracking as he pleads for mercy. Historians still argue whether such prayers swayed enemy hearts or merely echoed into nothingness. Eventually, the sun begins its slow descent, the heat grudgingly relinquishing its grip on the battlefield. You stagger forward, guided by the wounded who crawl toward any semblance of shelter. Broken tents line the outskirts like mangled sails. You duck under a torn canopy and find a shallow pit where dying brothers cling to life. You kneel beside one whose gaunt face is plastered in dust and dried sweat. He hands you a tattered bit of parchment, his last letter home, and whispers, "Tell them, we fought for more than gold." His voice trails off as the light dims in his eyes. Swallow hard, cradling his words like a fragile talisman. Above you, the sky shifts from blinding blue to bruised purple. Saladin's banners fly over captured tents, the crescent moon's silver glint nearly mocking in its calm. In the distance, you glimpse the burned remains of Christian camps, smoke rising in thin columns against a twilight backdrop. The once thunderous battlefield is reduced to a graveyard of broken wagons, snapped lances, and abandoned helmets. Templar, white and red surcoats, once a testament to purity and sacrifice, lie mottled in the grime. You push yourself to stand, joints aching, and stumble out into the cooling air. The survivors trek eastward toward Tyre and Acre, their faces etched with loss and disbelief. You join the ragged line, each step a reminder that faith and steel alone can't guarantee victory. As you trudge along, the last embers of day glow on the horizon, and you realize this defeat will echo through history-fueling legends of martyrdom and martyrdom's lure. Yet, even as the Templar banner lies sullied in Saladin's camp, a whisper of hope remains. From ashes, the order would rise again, though forever haunted by the horns of Hatton. You taste grit once more, but this time it carries resolve. You swallow hard, ready to bear witness to what comes next. You trudge beyond the smoking ruins of Hatton, following a ragged caravan down a rocky track toward the coastal fortress of Tyre, where rumors say a secret scriptorium still guards the order's most prized manuscripts. The sun dips low, turning sandstone walls amber as you slip through a narrow postern gate. Inside, a hush greets you-know clank of armor here. Just the soft scrape of feet on flagstones and distant drip of water echoing in vaulted corridors. Faint incense curls through the air, mingling with the scent of aged parchment and beeswax polish on oak shelves. Your fingers brush dust from a long wooden table strewn with scrolls bound by fraying hemp cord. Candlelight flickers, shadows dancing across faded ink. You lean in, tracing a hand-copied passage in Old French. Here, Chrétien de Troyes first spun the tale of a mystical vessel at King Arthur's table, planting the seed of the Holy Grail in 12th century imagination. Mainstream historians note that Chrétien's verses sparked the earliest literary Grail legends around. 1180s, where fact and fiction began their eternal dance. Historians still argue whether Chrétien based his cup on genuine Templar lore or pure poetic invention. One scroll lies open on a tilted lectern, its margins cramped with scribbled annotations in a brisk, knightly hand. Fringe tidbits say these notes were penned by a covert circle of monks who believed the Templars once unearthed the Grail in Solomon's temple and spirited it away through catacombs beneath Jerusalem. You squint at a triangular cipher beneath. The verse, maybe it's a secret map, or maybe it's someone's doodle after too much meat. Either way, you tuck the parchment's corner between your fingers, half expecting it to reveal glowing arrows under moonlight. Footsteps approach, creaking floorboards picking up your heartbeat. A silver-haired librarian in a soot-streaked robe gestures you over. He offers quill-dipped water to freshen the ink's hue, explaining that one medieval copyist tried washing away errors with wine. A vintage mistake, he says with a wink. That's your first joke, delivered quietly so as not to disturb the scrolls. He smiles, then points to a narrow alcove lined with pigeonholes full of tiny lead seals. Each seal bears a different emblem: chalices, lambs, crosses entwined with serpents. You lift a cool seal stamped with a chalice and run your thumb along its raised rim. Some scholars propose that these icons encoded pilgrimage routes to secret Grail vaults, hidden far from inquisitive eyes. Fringe theorists claim the chalice seal is proof the Templars possessed the cup itself, carrying it Europeward after Acre's fall. The seal feels impossibly heavy in your palm, as if all that whispered possibility has weight. Historians still argue whether any physical Grail connection existed, or if these seals merely marked devotional feasts. Leaning close, you inhale the musty aroma of vellum, spicy with hints of clove and old sandalwood. It's nearly as breathy as a spa diffuser, which is your second joke, because who wouldn't want catacomb.com in their nightly routine? You flip through a bound codex of illustrated lore. Its pages depict a knight kneeling before a golden cup, rays of light streaming like a medieval Instagram filter. The knight's helm is oddly stylized, almost like an early version of a sports team mascot helmet. You laugh softly, picturing Templar merge stands hawking, "I found the Grail mugs" in the codex's final folio. Latin caption reads, "Qui invenit, servit veritatem. Whoever finds it, keeps the truth." You taste your tongue at the Latins. Pledge. Mainstream accounts observe that Robert de Boron, an early Grail poet, used this mantra to suggest secret Christian mysteries passed down in Templar custody. Historians still argue whether Robert's verses reflect genuine ritual knowledge or mere allegory for soul's journey. A sudden draft rattles the candle above you, oil sputtering as a rat scuttles across the hem of your robe. You startle, nearly knocking over an inkwell that might have drowned centuries of research in one splash. That's your third joke, because if retenable manuscript massacres were a medieval hazard class, you'd need a hazard pay bonus. The librarian chuckles. Producing a tiny bell, he rings once. Moments later, a second scholar materializes, wiping soot from his spectacles. He lays out a folded parchment, drawn with a floor plan of some underground vault far below the city, marked by cryptic glyphs resembling entwined fish and crosses. He whispers that these glyphs mirror those found in Roslin Chapel's sassafras rumors. Say a band of fleeing Templars carved them in Scottish sandstone decades later. Fringe enthusiasts love to glue these dots into grand conspiracy webs spanning continents. You uncurl the parchment, noting each corridor and secret chamber. It feels like a minimalist IKEA map promising hidden treasure if only you can decode. The manual, you mumble. Assembly required, no Allen key included. The second scholar grins. No one here objects to sarcasm, as the librarians turn to consult other tomes. You linger in the dim hush, imagining Templar knights cradling the Grail in secret ceremonies beneath candle glow. The silence hums, the drip of water from overhead. Cisterns, low rustle of vellum as wind seeps through crenellations. And your own soft breathing like an audience waiting for the punchline in an ASMR unboxing video. You slip a cloak of humility over your shoulders and trace a slender staircase, spiraling downward. The steps narrow until you emerge in a rounded chamber hewn from bedrock. A single lamp swings from above, revealing a stone dais, crowned by an empty, scalloped basin, carved as though to cradle a vessel. Moss-softened grooves in the daises. Edges form the outline of a large cup. Your fingertips graze the basin's rim, and a shiver ripples along your spine. If this once held the Holy Grail well, the plaque warns, no relics here. Installed in 1892, probably by an overzealous tourist board. Still, your pulse quickens. The chamber's walls are inscribed with a spiral of text, Latin alternating, with an odd cipher of circles and lines. Fringe claim this is a prayer to activate the Grail's healing powers. Just pour in wine, recite the spiral, and voila, divine vintage. You imagine a medieval sommelier popping corks beneath stone vaults. You smirk, wondering if any Templar cellar masters really tried that recipe. Historians still argue whether any of these subterranean rooms hosted genuine rituals, or if they were symbolic tombs marking fallen brethren. The question hovers in the damp air like a half-remembered verse. You lean back, letting the flickering lamplight ripple across your face, and realize you've been holding your breath. You exhale slowly, letting the chamber's mystery settle into your bones. A distant footstep reminds you time marsh Templar, or no Templar. You retrace those winding stairs, scrolls tucked under arm, mind buzzing with layered legends. Walking back into the dusky scriptorium. You carry the weight of possibility in your pocket, a lead seal, a ciphered map, and the lingering question of what's true. Whether the Templars ever secured the Grail itself, or only the promise of a tale. All you know is that some legends endure precisely because they invite endless debate. You slip from the scriptorium's hushed glow into a corridor where only torchfire and your heartbeat light the way. The walls close in, paneled with centuries-old flagstones, slick from damp and bare feet. As you descend, a spiral stair hidden. Behind a tapestry of St. George's Red Cross, the stones grow colder, the air heavier with each step. You sense eyes watching, unseen but insistent. A faint drip of water echoes like a ticking clock, counting down the moments until you must pass through the veil between novice and brother Dot, at the foot of the stairs. You push open an iron-bound door and enter a chamber lit by a dozen beeswax. Candles whose pale flames tremble in the draught. Shadows writhe over the arched ceiling, turning carved crosses into winged beasts. Here in this soil-scented crypt beneath the chapel floor, the Order's youngest aspirants kneel before the Grand Master. Mainstream sources note that by the mid-12th century, Templar initiations were held in subterranean spaces to emphasize death and rebirth. Baptism by darkness before emerging into the light of service. Historians still argue whether these chambers were original to their Jerusalem temple or later adaptations borrowed from local funerary crypts. You steady your breathing as a heavy velvet curtain slides wide, revealing the stone dais at the crypt's heart. A silver basin sits atop it, rimmed with intricate crosses and the faint residue of consecrated water. Legend says that aspirants once drank from this same basin, this font of sacrifice, to seal their vows. Fringe tellers claim the water was mixed with powdered emeralds ground by disgraced alchemists, granting a visionary trance. You raise an eyebrow. Emerald-infused baptism sounds like the world's most expensive mouthwash. But it makes you wonder what other apocryphal additives circulated in hushed circles. A single torch holder steps forward, bearing a censer that emits smoke woven with myrrh and frankincense. The scent drapes over your senses like a velvet cloak, tinged with something foul or burnt pitch, or old incense cakes crushed under sandalwood logs. You cough as the fumes swirl, half expecting the smoke to form words in midair. That would be a bonus feature. Your destiny is written, but requires premium subscription. There's your first joke. Low enough to keep the ritual solemnity intact, an acolyte clad in black robes motions for you to kneel. You lower your head, feeling the rough-hewn stone bite into your knees. Above, the Grand Master's voice booms warm, resonant, carrying the hollow timbre of authority. Do you swear to defend Christ's pilgrims to the death, forsaking lands, titles, and kin? You answer, voice echoing in the vault. I do. Around you, other initiates murmur the same vow, voices blending into a ripple of devotion that feels less like speech and more like a woven tapestry of sound. Next comes the oath of obedience, whispered into your ear by a brother whose breath smells of cold wine and cold fear. You sense a blade touching your shoulder, the ceremonial sword of investiture. It's steel, cool, and unnerving. Fringe accounts claim this blade was forged in the Temple of Solomon using melted down coins from conquered Saracen treasuries, embedding captured wealth into every blade's core. You smirk at the thought of banking your enemy's gold into swords. Corporate synergy at its medieval finest, as the sword's tip rests near your collarbone. The Grand Master intones a litany of sins and perils, betrayal to be met with damnation, cowardice, a disgrace to be cleansed only by blood. The words swirl around you, a liturgical rap that could rival any modern-day motivational speech, only with slightly more brimstone. You almost expect a celestial PowerPoint slide to appear. Slide 1, do not falter. Slide 2, eternal life. You resist the urge to riv that last bit too irreverent, even for your bedtime snark. Then comes the silent trial. For a moment, every candle extinguishes at once. Immersed in total blackness, you feel only the brush of robes and the hush of pace, of breathing. Some say this blackout replicates the Holy Sepulchre's darkness before resurrection, while skeptics shrug it off as a standard theatrical gimmick to test nerves. Historians still argue whether this ritual darkness originated with the Templars or was borrowed from Cistercian novitiate ceremonies. A soft snap punctures the gloom as each candle is relit by hidden wicks behind the dais. Light returns, revealing your fellow initiates, eyes wide, faces pale as marble. You blink away the aftermatches, noticing how the torches now cast sharper shadows, as if the crypt itself has shifted towards the uncanny. One brother's surcoat is embroidered with a tiny eye in the lining, an obscure symbol you've only glimpsed in fringe pamphlets claiming it wards against spiritual spies. You elbow him lightly. Nice security patch. He cracks a nervous Grignard's second joke. The Grand Master steps down, handing you a rosary made of polished jet beads. Each bead so black, it absorbs candlelight separated by tiny silver crosses. He places it in your hand and whispers, "This chain binds you to the order, as you now bind your life to its service." You weigh the beads, feeling their cool smoothness, and wonder if they hold any whispered prayers scratched into their surfaces. A rumor persists that late initiates carved names into beads to leave a part of themselves behind like time capsules for souls. Fringe scholars love to spin theories that each bead holds a saint's fragment or a sliver of holy relic. Choir-like intonation rises as a deep-voiced brother atop a raised platform chants an excerpt from the Rule of the Order. The cadences, rich, solemn tug at your spine. You trace the words with your lips, though they're in Latin you hardly comprehend. Their musicality overrides meaning, a hypnotic mantra that sinks you into a gentle trance. Yet part of you marvels, could a medieval ASMR video look any different? You chuckle inwardly. Third, joke secured. When the chant ends, the Grand Master beckons you forward. You climb the dais steps cautiously, aware that every mind in the crypt is fixed on you. He halts at the edge and uncovers a small silver dagger. In his belt, a tool for the next vow. You swallow, remembering that death vow from chapter 118, a promise to offer your life if the order demands it. Mainstream records confirm that Templar pledges included promises of self-sacrifice, up to martyrdom. Historians still argue whether Grand Masters ever invoked this vow literally, or if it served more as rhetorical devotion. He extends the dagger, its blade glinting under flickering flame. Take it with reverent fingers, noting an etched inscription. At the hilt's base, in hoc signo vinces. In this sign, you will conquer or die trying. A fringe account suggests some initiates dip the blade in goat's blood to anoint it with battle essence. You hurriedly inspect your hands. No blood. Crisis averted, but you muse that goat sacrifice would be a logistical nightmare. Beneath castle walls, he nods solemnly and says, "You are now one of us. May your sword be true, your heart unyielding." With that, you slide the dagger's point across your palm, a shallow cut for the sharing of blood. Pain flares sharp, immediate, then dulls to a warm hum. You press your wounded hand to your chest, mingling your blood with the Templar cross embroidered above your heart. No gauze or antiseptic here, just faith and tradition. You lick your lips, tasting iron and candle smoke, and wonder if medieval first aid manuals advised you to pay the local barber surgeon extra for stitches. No such footnote survives. As the final echo of dripping water fades, the Grand Master signals the end of the rite. A brother steps forward with a rough-hewn shawl, draping it over your shoulders. It's the first white mantle with a red cross you've ever worn. The weight is light, but laden with unspoken demands. Total obedience, secret loyalty, endless vigilance. You stand, vision blurred by the candle haze, and look at your reflection in a blackened brass plate on the wall. There, a new identity stares. Back one forged in darkness and sealed with blood. You exit the crypt into the cool night air, torches lighting your path back to the courtyard. Moonlight glimmers off cross-tipped pinnacles, and you realize your life has irrevocably changed. Whether these initiation secrets were wholly unique to the Templars or adapted from other orders, you now carry their mystery within you. Historians still argue whether the rite's more enigmatic elements were originally symbolic theater or genuine mystical transmission. A stray owl hoots from a battlement, as though announcing your rebirth. You push back your hood, feeling the mantle's linen crease against your skin, and mentally prepare for the dawn's drills. But for now, you carry the crypt's hush in your bones. A whisper beneath each breath, an oath that will guide your every step. You step into the echoing stone halls of the Palais de la Cite in Paris, lantern light quivering against ribbed vaults as a chill breeze snakes down dark corridors. The air tastes of damp mortar and whispered fear, blending with the faint aroma, a burning pitch from a torch grate somewhere deeper. Servants scurry about, their robes brushing cold flagstones, while armored guards stand sentinel by carved oaken doors bearing fleur-de-lis crests. You feel the weight of royal power pressing, in each footstep amplified by vaulted ceilings. Outside, the Seine murmurs under moonlight, as if warning you that tides of betrayal run deeper than its currents. Word travels swiftly here. King Philip IV, the Fair, has summoned the order's leaders to stand trial for heresy and blasphemy. On October 13, 1307, he ordered hundreds of Templars across France seized in coordinated midnight raids, a moment immortalized as the dawn of the Black Friday superstition. Historians still argue whether Philip's motives were driven by greed for the order's vast treasury or by genuine zeal to purify Christendom of secret sins. You taste iron on your tongue, as if already biting into the bitter bread of political maneuvering. A hush falls as you pass under the grand chamber's pointed arch. Candle sconces cast dancing silhouettes on the walls, veiled bishops murmuring prayers, scribes ink-staining vellum scrolls, and courtiers flitting like moths around flickering flames. At the chamber's center stands the imprisoned Grand Master. Jacques de Maul, his white mantle sullied and his iron gauntlets heavy with shame. His beard is flecked with gray, bright with defiance, but you sense his shoulders curved under the invisible yoke of royal decree. Guards drag in fellow knights, shackled wrists clinking. You wince when one Templar's chain snaps against the marble bench, sending sparks of fear through the assembly. A court scribe reads charges aloud, wicked rituals said to include spitting on the cross, indecent kisses, and secret idol worship. Fringe pamphlets insist these claims were concocted from medieval erotica and rumors whispered by disgruntled servants. You can't help but shudder at the suggestion of sacred relics used as shoehorns, fringe indeed, but sufficiently vivid to chill your spine. The air grows dense with incense and tension. A visiting inquisitor, robed in black, steps forward, voice echoing, "Confess your sins or face the wrath of both God and King." You squint at his face, half hidden by a cowl, imagining the hem of his robes snagging on scandalous secrets. That's your first joke, low-voiced enough to avoid sacrilege, but loud enough to crack your own tension. He jabs a finger at a trembling knight, who flinches like a bird shot from the sky. A hush ripples through the Templar ranks as an interrogator brandishes a metal spike instrument rumored to specialize in extracting confessions without leaving obvious scars. You swallow and wonder if medieval torture workshops had Yelp reviews. 5 stars if you like being asked uncomfortable questions. That's your second joke, because if you're going to face a rack of rotted ropes, you might as well laugh first. Jacques de Maul stands, shoulders squared, as witnesses are called. A candle guttering on the dais casts his gaunt profile in stark relief. He denies every accusation, voice ringing, "We have served Christ with purity." These charges stem from envy and royal greed. The courtiers murmur, some glancing at the alabaster chests rumored to hold Templar gold deep beneath the palace. Historians still argue whether Philip's astrologers truly believed the order practiced sorcery or simply used astrology to hedge royal investments. You sidle closer to a small barred window to glimpse Paris by night, rooftops glinting. Under a silver moon, church bells tolling a midnight hour that feels more like a death knell. A faint hiss drifts through the bars, a rat scavenging scraps of fear and discarded parchments. You whisper, "At least that critter knows where the crumbs are." Your third joke, muffled so only you can hear. The rat scuttles away, leaving you with the scratchy echo of claws on stone. Back in the chamber, a frail old knight is brought forward on a litter, his voice a rasp. I saw them worship a headless calf made of wax. The judges nod gravely, as if such nonsense requires no rebuttal. Fringe theories suggest these tales were ghost-written by Philip's court poets to vilify the order in melodramatic style. You fight the urge to point out that headless calf worship sounds like a culinary disaster gone wrong. You keep your mouth shut. This is royal business. It's not a late-night comedy sketch. Philip's royal seal stamps each verdict with crimson wax, the sound echoing like a hammer blow each time it grounds heavier charges. You note the breadcrumbs of logic missing between accusations and evidence, yet the verdict rolls onward, unstoppable. Historians still argue whether any Templar knight truly escaped conviction in France, given the tightly controlled judicial process. You glance at the scribe's quillets, tip stained darker than in wondering if it once dabbed in human tears. A bell tolls, signaling the end of this session. Jacques de Maul snaps his chains together. The click resonating like stave. The click resonating like finality. You feel the chamber's oppressive hush lift slightly, replaced by the low murmur of scheming courtiers. Outside the door, a page hands you a folded note sealed with the royal fleur-de-lis, instructions to procure transport for convicted knights to nearby dungeons. You break the seal, inhale the cold scent of royal parchment, and taste the bitterness of complicity. No matter how small your role, you step into the outer gallery. Lanterns flickering over tapestries depicting Charlemagne's victories and the cross-bearing armies of old. The imagery feels mocking now, heroes clad in light, undone by darker intrigues. A breeze drifts in, carrying the faint scent of roasting chestnuts from a nearby stall. You suck in the smell and joke to yourself, if I go down with the Templars, at least I'll smell like autumn. It's enough to lift the mood. A final jest at the edge of tragedy. As you descend a narrow stair toward an exit draped in shadows, Kiumaya, where a young knight huddles in chains. He glances up, eyes wild with betrayal's flash. You meet his gaze and nod, the silent promise that someone, someday, will tell the story without skimping on the truths or the jokes. Historians still argue whether Philip's purge sealed the order's doom or merely accelerated its inevitable transformation. You step outside into the night's chill, heart heavy with the knowledge that royal machinations can slay more than armies, they can kill reputations, legacies, and the very idea of sanctuary. Above you, the palace bells toll a new hour. Somewhere in Paris, the Templar gold glitters unseen in hidden vaults, financing schemes that spin like spiderwebs across Europe. You trudge away on cobblestones slick with mist, conscience pricking like a fine thorn. The city's lights blur behind you, distant and untrustworthy. You pause on a bridge over the Seine, watching water swirl under ancient arches. In its ripples, you glimpse futures unwritten, of trials by fire, whispers in chapels, and a legacy forged anew. Whether the truth of Philip's machinations ever fully emerges or remains buried beneath royal edicts, you know one thing for certain: betrayal casts the longest shadow of all. You trudge up a slick ramp toward the tower's gatehouse, the iron portcullis yawning like a cavern of secrets. Damp air slithers around you, carrying the stink of rotting wood and distantly fermenting ale. Your boots splash through puddles that gleam under torchlight, reflecting grimed stone walls rising in oppressive tears. Each drip of condensation sounds like a sharpened blade, tapping impatience and unwelcome. Metronome, counting down to your confinement. Guards in heavy mail and embroidered royal blue tunics flank the narrow corridor. One propels you forward with the butt of a halberd, and you stumble through a low doorway into the oubliette. A pit-like cell whose ceiling is so low you nearly scrape your helm. Mainstream records note that in January 1308, King Edward II ordered the arrest of English Templars, detaining them in the Tower of London under suspicion of heresy, fraud, and secret rites. Historians still argue whether his decision reflected deference to Philip IV's purge in France, or a genuine fear of Templar power. The cell's air is rank and stifling. You wheel your head, eyes straining against the gloom, and spot inches of brackish water creeping across the flagstones. A sliver of moon filters through a barred window high above, painting ghostly bars across your chest, literal reminders of vows you barely understood when you first knelt beneath candle glow. The walls are scrawled with charcoal markings, tiny crosses, looping scripts, and a curious spiral that squeaks out faint echoes when the wind presses through. Fringe rumor insists that these inscriptions form a Templar escape map, marking hidden sewer tunnels beneath the Thames. You press your palm to the wall, half expecting a latch to click. No luck. Just flaky mortars and the buzzing promise of stories you'll never verify. Your stomach hiccups, hunger gnaws at your gut. The jailer's kindness limited to a cup of stale gruel once a day. It tastes like damp straw with a phantom hint of salt. You choke it down anyway, laughing hoarsely as you joke, "If this is penance, I could have done with fewer mushrooms." That's your first joke, 'cause a cell without humor is like a sword without an edge, useless for cutting through despair in the faint glow. You notice a small alcove in one corner. Nestled there is a chipped mug stamped with the royal fleur-de-lis, your daily ration vessel. Some whisper that these mugs were dipped in mercury to ward off disease. A fringe prescription that left many suspects trembling with tremors rather than conviction. You dry your mouth on a threadbare sleeve. Grateful mercury tremors seem optional. Hours stretch into days. You count them by the shift of guard boots overhead and the slow dimming of the single torch outside your cell. On the third night, you hear distant wails, knights elsewhere, confessing to unspeakable acts. The interrogator's metal instruments clatter, a sinister duet with the city's midnight bells. A fellow prisoner, gaunt and hollow-eyed, whispers through the bars that some Templars were spared the French rack because Edward II sought to keep them alive as bargaining chips with the papacy. Historians still argue whether English captives endured subtle, psychological torture rather than overt brutality. Your wrists chafe from iron manacles, leaving angry red welts that throb in time with every heartbeat. You flex stiff fingers, wondering if medieval manacle designs had ever included ergonomic grips. Joke number 2 bursts out. Next time, remind me to invest in padded cuffs. You nearly cough on the punchline, but the fellow prisoner cracks a grin before silence reclaims. The cell. One damp dawn. A scrivener's quill scratches through the gate's hatch as parchment slides in. You snatch at a summons to appear before the king's council. Even under oath, you can't resist a cheeky thought. Royal summonses are like medieval emails, often lost, occasionally lethal, and never considerate of attachments. Your third joke, and you file it away for safekeeping. You're dragged through winding corridors of clanging chains, where torchlit walls are lined with iron racks and bones bleached like bleachers at a gladiator match. A distant whisper tells you this corridor once held Viking captives for ransom. They're Scandinavian runes, barely visible above newer Templar etchings. Fringe sources claim those runes prophesied the order's fall centuries before it happened. Runic. Insurance policies against historical amnesia. You pivot through a tapestry of shadows, digesting the thought of Templars reading Viking doom lists by torchlight. Before the council chamber, you pause in a vestibule whose walls are lined with sculpted heads of lions and dragons. stony. Mouths seem bent toward you, as if whispering counsel. Speak carefully, brother, you swallow, adjusting your sooty surcoat and squaring your shoulders against the gathering dread. A page opens the heavy door, revealing a semicircle of stone benches where prelates, nobles, and a scowling royal clerk await. Silence falls. You step into the great hall, the torch smoke wafting like incense over carved oak benches. Edward II sits on an elevated dais, his ermine-lined cloak sputtering embers on polished stone. He glances down through hooded eyes, brows furrowed with the weight of politics and papal pressure. Two bishops flank him. One wears a pectoral cross so large it looks like a dinner plate. Mainstream chronicles note that Bishop Robert Winchelsea, once sympathetic to the Templars, reluctantly presided, torn between canon law and royal decree. Historians still argue whether Winchelsea secretly sought to mitigate sentences or silently applauded the purge. The clerk reads your indictment: accusations of blasphemy, clandestine oaths, and twisted midnight ceremonies. You look around, eyes resting on embroidered banners bearing both cross and crown, a tense visual marriage of church and state. You feel the tug of two loyalties to your vows and to a king whose favor you once courted. When they call your name, step forward. Voice hoarse but steady. I have served Christ and crown with equal loyalty. Your words echo, bouncing off vaulted ceilings like distant thunder. A bishop shrieks, confess, or be judged with the rest. You glance at the royal clerk's quill already poised for your name. Your pulse quickens, and you know your fate teeters between acquittal, penance, or worse. The king's gaze meets yours. He leans forward, iron crown glittering. Knights of the Temple, he intones, we seek truth. Speak it freely. You inhale, feeling the cold stone floor anchor you. You could recant, claim madness, or reveal secrets that would shame your brothers. But silence feels truer than any forced lie. A hush falls. The only sound is the torches' dying hiss. You hold your breath as the council deliberates, time suspended between hope and dread. Outside, the Thames flows on, indifferent to fates decided within ancient walls. Historians still argue whether English Templars were ultimately exonerated and absorbed into other houses or quietly expelled to vanish into history's margins. Whatever transpires next, you realize this tribunal in the tower has become a crucible, forging new identities from fractured faith and fractured politics. A final gavel falls. You brace yourself for the verdict, heart echoing like a hammer on anvil, whether you emerge pardoned, penitent, or a hushed footnote. You know this chapter of imprisonment will haunt the order's legacy for centuries to come. You urge your weary horse onward through the mist-shrouded crags of the Scottish Highlands, each hoofbeat muffled by damp heather and the hush of ancient pines. The air tastes of peat, smoke, and fresh rain, so cold it pricks your nostrils like tiny needles. Shadows pool between boulders, and distant ridges vanish into gray velvet fog. You stroke your cloak's collar tighter, half wishing for a dram of whiskey and half mourning that your saddle stash only holds stale hardtack. After the Templar purge across Europe, rumors whispered that a handful of escaped knights found refuge under Scotland's expansive banner. Mainstream accounts confirm that in the early 14th century, Robert the Bruce offered safe harbor to fugitives persecuted by English and French monarchies, seeing in them seasoned warriors and oaths sworn to Christ's cause. Historians still argue whether those knights directly aided Bruce at Bannockburn or served more discreet roles, training local levies in cavalry tactics. A sudden gust rattles the bracken along the narrow path. You taste the dampness on your tongue and swear you hear distant bagpipes, though it's probably just the wind. Whistling through sheep's woolen jumpers, drying on fence posts. That's your first joke. Drifting across glens, like a whispered lullaby, the path steepens, and you push your mount up a rocky incline. Leather reins slick under your fingers. Somewhere ahead, smoke curls from a lone cottage's chimney, an invitation or a trap. Okay. You can't tell. Local lore insists that the Sinclair family, lairds of Roslin, welcomed fleeing Templars in exchange for secret knowledge of fortification and alchemy. Fringe tales claim that William St. Clair, 14th century founder of Roslin Chapel, was himself a Templar initiate who wove cryptic symbols into its stones. You squint as the chapel spire emerges from the mist, its pinnacles reaching for the low-hanging clouds like spidery fingers. You half expect a hidden trapdoor at its base, labeled Access to Holy Grail Storage, Keep Door Closed. You dismount at a rutted track leading to the chapel's approach, boots crunching on pebbles dotted with moss. The chapel's exterior is a riot of sculpted foliage, knights, and mysterious cubes. You run your hand over a carving of an apprentice, digging beardless, almost smug-end. Wonder if that's a sly self-portrait of the sculptor. That's your second joke. Medieval stonemasons with egos, bigger than cathedral vaults. Stepping beneath the weathered sandstone arch, you feel the temperature drop, as if walking into a crypt of memory and myth. Candle stubs stand in iron holders. Snapped wicks, blackened like spent torches, narrating 1,000 whispered secrets. You inhale the musty perfume of candle fat and stained glass. A sensory blend that's oddly comforting, like an ASMR video where someone slowly unwraps a chocolate bar. Inside, alcoves shelter statues whose faces are worn by centuries of votive prayers. One niche holds a carved knight in full helm, hands clasped in prayer, a surcoat's faint cross peeking through worn folds. Mainstream scholars note that Roslin Chapel's construction began in 1446 under William St. Clair, long after the Templars. Dissolution suggesting symbolism was more commemorative than conspiratorial. Historians still argue whether these carvings echo genuine Templar iconography or simply reflect 15th century artistic trends. You wander toward the ornate apprentice pillar, its spiral fluting defying logic as you trace caps and finials carved with intertwined vines and beasts. Fringe sources claim the pillar hides an encoded star map pointing to buried treasures, only visible under a full moon's silver light. You crane your neck skyward, scanning for that lunar glow, but all you see is a clouded sky typical for Scotland, where even the heavens can't pick a clear night. Third, joke fielded. A local custodian, robes dusted with lime wash from recent repairs, greets you. He leans close and whispers about a hidden chamber beneath the chancel floor, sealed and forgotten after a 17th century flood. He yields you a rusty iron key, its bow bent like a question mark. You test the wards, wincing as the metal screeches against the cold latch. If medieval locks squeak like modern doors, you'd definitely invest in some medieval WD-40. The chambers. Hatch groans open, revealing stone steps slick with moss and echoes of drips. You descend, each footfall darker than the last, and find yourself in a vaulted crypt lined with empty alcoves. You pace between them, half expecting to see gold casks or polished Grail replicas. Instead, you find inscriptions scratched into the walls, Dum Spiro Spero over one niche, Custodia Veritatis over another. In Latin, they proclaim hope and guardianship sentiments, both noble and vague. A sudden candle flickers at the crypt's far end. You approach, heart tapping against ribs like an alarm drum. The flame reveals a small stone altar bearing a tarnished silver chalice. Its bowl is empty, but you swear the faint shimmer of residual wine ghosts the surface. Fringe legend insists. This is the very Grail smuggled here by Templar exiles, consecrated with oil from Gethsemane. You reach out, grazing the chalice's rim. Its metal as cool as a gravestone. A low breeze snuffs the candle, and darkness floods the chamber. You freeze, breath held. When the light returns, the chalice is gone, vanished as if spirited away by unseen hands. You exhale, feeling your pulse slow like a retreating tide. Whether the Grail ever nestled here or simply fueled centuries of imagination, no one dares claim certainty. Historians still argue whether any artifact remains or if the real treasure is the story itself. You retrace your steps, hefting the iron key in your fist like a lifeline. Emerging into the chapel's nave, dawn's pale light filters through tracery of glass, painting the floor in ghostly hues. The frescoes and carvings glow, and you breathe in the hush of ancient devotion. Sheep bleat faintly outside, tethered in the clearing beyond the graveyard. You chuckle softly, your final joke, imagining their being forming the world's oldest Templar choir. As you mount your mount once more, you glance back at Rosslyn Chapel, standing sentinel over glens and legends. The mist rolls in, swallowing its lower walls in a silent embrace. You settle into your saddle, reins in hand, and urge your horse toward the north road. The path ahead winds through dark forests and lonely moorse places, where myths are born in the space between rock and sky. You taste peat and pine on the morning breeze. Resolve lingering on your tongue. Exile here wasn't an end, but a transformation. Those fleeing knights might have vanished into these hills, but their legends took root in stones and stories. Today, you carry whispers of their flight and the echo of cloister bells wedged in sandstone. Whether the Templar legacy truly found sanctuary in Scotland or only lives on in crossword puzzles and conspiracy bedtime reading, you know one thing. Some journeys are measured not in miles, but in the mist that follows you home. You slip through a hidden door behind an unassuming bookseller's shop on Hamburg's Bader Strage and descend a narrow stone stairwell slick with damp. The air grows cooler with each step, carrying hints of old book leather, vinegar, and dripping candle wax that mixes in your nostrils like a musty cocktail. At the bottom, a low-ceilinged long room opens before you, lit by clusters of beeswax candles in iron sconces. Their golden glow reveals battered oak tables strewn with pamphlets, plum tracts, and leather-bound tomes whose titles are scratched out in hurried script. You sense the hush of eager scholarship, something more, half-whispered thrills. You settle on a bench opposite a robed figure. He slides a dog-eared pamphlet across the table, its brass clasp nearly worn through. This fragile tract turns out to be Fama Fraternitatis. It's the first Rosicrucian manifesto published in 1614, proclaiming the coming of a scholarly brotherhood wielding both faith and alchemy to heal Christendom's ills. Mainstream historians credit these tracts with igniting European interest in esoteric science and early modern mysticism. Historians still argue whether the Fama's author was a single genius cloaked in anonymity or a circle of Protestant intellectuals using secrecy as rhetorical theater. Your fingertips brush dust from its opening lines. The crackle of parchment under your touch feels intimate, like handling someone's confessional notebook. You inhale the pamphlet's aroma-tangy ink, spiced with nutmeg and old received wisdom. It smells oddly like the spice merchant stalls outside Jerusalem's bazaars, invoking your memory of Rosslyn Chapel's incense-scented cloisters. A faint rat skitter from a corner rat hole makes you smile. Remember that rat in Paris who snatched scraps of confession? This one might be taking field notes. You flip pages to reveal passages promising philosophers' stone formulas, recipes for elixirs of immortality, and cryptic genealogies tracing initiates' bloodlines back to the Crusader Knights. Fringe lore insists these sections were smuggled out of Templar strongholds, written in ciphers only decryptable by those bearing a red cross complete with alchemical diagrams. depicting powdered lapis lazuli and crushed emerald veins. You raise an eyebrow, emerald-infused eye mask might be revolutionary for dark circles. But you doubt 17th century beauty salons stocked it. That's your first joke, soft enough to avoid angering local acolytes. Another figure glides over, carrying a stack of the Confessio Fraternitatis, the second Rosicrucian text published in 1615. You slip the pamphlet into your satchel, noting its margin notes in Latin, Templarium, sanguine connexus, linked by Templar blood. Whether those scribbles represented genuine secret tradition or a later commentator's flourish, no one can say. Historians still argue whether Rosicrucians actually claimed Templar heritage or simply co-opted its imagery for legitimacy. You wonder if the next manifesto will include emoji-like symbols for easier decoding. Imagine a sparkling gem reacting to your touch. Behind you, muted conversation flickers. One scholar extols the Rosicrucian influence on early experimental chemistry, while another scoffs, insisting they were mere literary provocateurs hiding behind mystical jargon. You lean forward and murmur your own theory. Maybe they just wanted a killer marketing campaign. Get your secrets. Free shipping. The pair exchanges amused glances. Your second joke awarded with a shake of a dusty head. On a nearby table, you spot a small 1623 alchemical treatise titled Chemical Wedding of Christian Rosenkreuz. Its cover stained with tinctures of unknown origin. You trace the embossed rose and cross emblem, fingers picking at the fragile binding. Fringe pamphlets assert that Rosenkreuz was an alias for a surviving Templar knight who faked his death at the stake and resurfaced in Germany to pass on Solomon's lost arts. Mainstream scholarship, however, dates the chemical wedding as an allegorical romance with witty puns on willow bark and copper sulfate. Historians still argue whether any real alchemists took it as literal instruction rather than a spiritual parable. You open the treatise to a plate illustrating a winged serpent, encircling a chalice, direct echo of the boss you saw carved in the cloister's vault last spring. It feels like a callback from an old friend, that same spiral motif rising up centuries later in printed form. You sigh, letting the candlelight flicker over the image, and joke to yourself, if only Spotify offered a Rosicrucian alchemy playlist, I'd be golden. That's your third joke, proving that even in a room thick with esoteric ambition, you can't resist modern asides. A faint knock on the door interrupts your reverie. A scholar in flame-hued robes enters, bearing a leather satchel. She settles beside you and withdraws a stack of private correspondence's letters from Frederick III's court referencing a Brotherhood of the Rose Cross, with financial ties to French noble houses once patronizing the Templars. You skim the letter's ornate script. References to chambers beneath Paris and vaults in London that sound suspiciously like safe deposit caches. According to French historians, these correspondences reveal a direct line from Malays exiles to Rosicrucian financiers. You squint, wondering if conspiracy podcasts have ever cited court letters as credible sources. Likely not, but they should try it for dramatic effect. The scholar tilts her head, pointing out the cipher in the Marjuna series of interlocking circles and crosses, almost identical to the one you discovered carved into the round church at Tamar. That's your mental callback. Hidden glyphs, linking Rosicrucian pamphlets to Templar architecture and alchemical labs. She mumbles, if you fold here, it reveals a map. You fold the paper, and sure enough, faint lines emerge, routes threading from Cyprus to Prague. The revelation feels like unfolding an IKEA manual that actually makes sense. You chuckle at the irony. A hush settles as she whispers, the Brotherhood claims its alchemy is spiritual, not material, transforming souls rather than lead. Whether they sincerely practiced inner transmutation or merely aspired to it in poetic rhetoric remains a point of contention. Historians still argue whether Rosicrucian alchemy influenced scientific development or distracted scholars with unreachable quests. You lean back, nodding, tasting the slight burn of wine mixed with clove from your lips, fuel for long nights. Spent chasing encoded legacies, you push aside a stack of broadsheets, proclaiming the Fraternitas' public manifesto to the invisible. College. Its pages advertise gatherings in Frankfurt, Dresden, and Heidelberg ephemeral salons where initiates shared geometry, herbal concoctions, and moral philosophy. You trace the linen-bound invitation by order of the Rose Cross, only the worthy shall sip the elixir. A stray breeze from a cracked window rattles a skull-shaped goblet on display. You have to expect a mouse to scuttle out wearing a miniature cloak. But the only guest is you, perched on the edge of centuries-old rumor and curious truth. The robed figure who greeted you rises, gesturing to a long cabinet filled with glowing glass vials and alembics. He uncorks a flask and offers you a drop of bright amber liquid. Its scent is honeyed, spiced with cardamom far gentler than the powdered lotus you once imagined. He smiles and whispers, a tincture of courage, distilled from myrrh and rose petals. You taste it warm, sweet, with a slight bite like a late-night espresso for the soul. Whether it's genuine alchemical brew or a simple herbal distillate, you feel a soft calm settle into your bones. Before you rise to leave, you thumb through an index of names, noble patrons, scholars, and shadowy figures purportedly descended from Templar lines. Each entry is flanked by a tiny rose-and cross printer's mark. The implication is tantalizing. A living network of secret bloodlines, blending Templar chivalry with Rosicrucian enlightenment. Scholars debate whether this network ever operated in earnest, or if it's just the most enduring conspiracy theory in Western esotericism. You close the pamphlet with a slow exhale, fingertips lingering on the embossed mark as you ascend the damp stairwell back to Hamburg's lamplit streets. The city's distant bells toll midnight. You feel the weight of pamphlets in your satchel, each a promise of hidden doctrines and tantalizing clues. Whether Rosicrucians truly preserve Templar secrets or simply immortalize them in allegory may remain forever contested. But for now, you carry their whispered potential in your petita. Secret too delicious to forget. You slip beneath the heavy oaken lintel of an 18th century Masonic lodge in London's dimly lit Temple district. Lantern glow flickering against polished mahogany paneling and dust-laden flagstones. The air tastes faintly of beeswax and old parchment echoes of the scriptoriums and crypts you've wandered before, while the murmur of distant carriages rolls in like a somber symphony. You feel the hush of secrecy settling around you, thicker than the incense of the initiation chamber. As you trudge across a threshold that promises both camaraderie and conspiracy, long after the Rosicrucian tracks disappeared from Hamburg's clandestine libraries, a network of speculative stonemasons was weaving its own mythology. By 1717, 4 London lodges had united to form the premier Grand Lodge of England, a cornerstone in Masonic history that codified rituals, symbols, and arcane lore into printed constitutions. Mainstream historians credit this year as the birth of modern Freemasonry, where guild structures blended with philosophical lodges under a common roof. Historians still argue whether these speculative masons merely mimicked operative builders or they consciously resurrected the Knights Templars' secret traditions. You lean against a grand carved stone near the hearth, running your fingertips over a square and compass emblem etched deep into the sandstone. The dust feels ancient, as though time itself has settled into its grooves. Fringe lore insists these symbols were grafted onto lodge stones by surviving Templar knights, camouflaging their own heraldic crosses beneath layers of speculative veneer. You trace a faint fleur-de-lis hidden in one compass, arm so shallow. It's nearly invisible unless you've studied that Rosslyn Chapel carving under moonlight. The thought tickles you. Maybe you're touching the same heraldry hushed up at the Palais de la Cite. A fellow initiate, robed in midnight blue and silver trim, nods to you solemnly before disappearing behind a crimson velvet curtain. You sense his departure as a silent drumbeat, memories of that cryptic cipher in Jerusalem's tunnel chamber reverberating in your mind. This lodge exudes geometric precision. Square pillars flank a marble floor inlaid with tesseracts and interlocking triangles. Each pattern shimmers in the lamplight, almost humming with encoded resonance. You quip under your breath, "I've seen fewer triangles in a geometry final." That's your first joke, an irreverent chime in an otherwise grave concert of ritual. Above. The vaulted ceiling bears a network of rafters carved into a subtle cross-patti, a motif you first spotted stitched on sacramental surcoats centuries ago. Botanicals and scrolling vines twist around it, hinting at alchemical roots. You duck beneath a second emblem, noticing how its arms taper like the Templar cross's flared ends. Fringe enthusiasts contend that every lodge erected before 1740 hides at least one such cross, an invisible marker for those in the know. You smirk. It's like medieval graffiti from ghostly taggers, except these vandals use chisels and vows instead of spray paint. The lodge's steward approaches with a silver tray holding 3 glass vials. He offers you one, its contents shimmering like liquid moonlight. "A tincture of remembrance," he whispers, "to sharpen your mind for tonight's charges." You uncork it and inhale notes of jasmine, cardamom, and a wisp of burnt rosemary. It feels oddly reminiscent of that Hamburg Courage tincture, same floral base, but with more botanical bravado. You laugh softly. "If I keep sampling these, I'll need a medieval pharmacist on speed dial." That's your second joke, because even in hallowed halls, can't resist a wink at modern emergencies. Your gaze drifts to a massive stone arch framing the master's dais. Its keystone bears a weathered inscription, "Incepto ne desistem, may I not shrink from my purpose." If you recall a similar phrase scrawled in the Berlin crypt, "Dum spiro spero." Both admonitions capture the same spirit of perseverance that powered Templar knights through siege and exile. You muse that these lodges might be heirs to that stubborn will reformulated for candlelit debates instead of battlefield charges. On a side table, neatly arranged weekly minutes lie stacked like miniature annals. The top sheet records a debate on operative stonemasonry's role in constructing York Minster versus the speculative rituals of modern lodges. One elder opines that operative masons initiated Templar knights into building vaults at Jerusalem, passing down a mystical blueprint. Another counters it was simply guild politics meeting Protestant philosophy. Historians still argue whether medieval masons ever handed out ceremonial trowels to newly knighted warriors, or if this is elegant retrobranding. You swallow a sip of tincture and murmur, guild lore or ghost story. It's hard to tell after a drop of moonlight. A hush descends as the master of ceremonies steps forward, tapping a gavel sculpted like a miniature mace. You shuffle closer, knuckles grazing stone seating carved with square mortises for regulatory plumb lines. The room dims as he recounts the lodge's lineage from cathedral builders to Rosicrucian correspondence. And now to this conclave of enlightened gentlemen. Every phrase drips with illusion's secret pillars, stolen scrolls, disguised chivalric codes. Fringe accounts weave Templar treasure maps into Masonic floor plans, citing a quarry near Tyre whose stones were shipped to England. You joke quietly. Must have been awkward logistics. Yes, Your Grace. The cargo includes brass lanterns and holy blood. That's your third joke. Because some shipments beggar belief, the steward returns with a map rolled on a mahogany desk. It charts lodges across Europe, Paris, Edinburgh, Vienna opens, marking each city like constellations. Lines interconnect them, forming a web that spans former Templar outposts. You unfold it and spot a faded emblem near Prussia Red Cross superimposed on Masonic squares. You lean in, breath warm on parchment, and swear the paint still glitters under candlelight. Whether this was painted by Templar survivors or by 18th century romantics remains contested. But the visual link is tantalizing. On a narrow shelf, small, pedigree charts trace lodge membership through generations. Many names overlapping with exiled Templars listed in 1308 Tower records. A genealogist seated nearby points out the apparent continuity, though mainstream scholars caution that reuse of common French names could simply be coincidence. Historians still argue whether any bloodline escaped annihilation or quietly intermarried into Scottish lairds and London merchants' ancestral hiding spots worthy of their own cryptic architecture. You drift to the raised dais and catch a glimpse of the master's collar, a heavy silver jewel bearing a sunburst around a cross patty. You remember the pulsating beams of that roslyn rose window. Another sunburst framing a lamb. Seems every lodge symbol echoes cathedral bosses and cloister carvings. You wink at the notion. What's next? A sacred geometry TikTok tutorial. It's a modern jab. But you figure the past grandmaster would appreciate the irony more than an idle guess at your lineage. The ceremony concludes with a soft chant lead. By the master, unus ad unum, omnis ad unum, 1 to 1, all to one. The words roll through the room like a gentle wave, textured by the weight of printed constitutions and hidden glyphs in stone. You close your eyes, letting the resonance settle in your chest. It's a familiar comfort, whether drawn from Templar monastic chants or speculative brotherhood's hopes for unity. As you exit through the same threshold you entered, you pause under the lantern's halo, brushing dust from the carved compass's edge. You taste cardamom on your tongue, mingling with the grime of centuries-old speculation. Outside, the Thames glints in merchant lanterns. You realize that whether Freemasonry truly sprang from Templar foundations or is simply a later brotherhood, cloaked in romantic echoes, its stones carry whispers of the past. And you, just another pilgrim of secret histories, have added your footsteps to their dusty grooves. You slip back into your tower chamber just as the moon's silver light brushes the rooftops, and the hush of midnight drapes itself over the city. Your satchel of parchments rests on the scarred oak table, each sheet edged in soot and corners, curled from age. You untie the leather straps and let the dusty rolls unfurl, revealing scrawled Latin passages, angular runes, and looping asides that only half make sense in the wavering candle glow. A draft from the open window rattles the panes, as if urging you to hurry before dawn breaks on another secret waiting to be exposed. Mainstream scholars note that surviving Templar libraries once held hundreds of volumes, ranging from biblical commentaries to military treatises, now lost to time. Historians still argue whether any of these volumes contained deliberate, coded predictions of future events, or if the surviving ciphered fragments are nothing more than medieval bookkeeping encrypted for privacy. You lean in, eyes tracing a series of interlocking circles crowned with tiny crosses. It reminds you of the cipher in Rosalind's basement chamber, where folding the page revealed a map of hidden vaults beneath Scottish soil. Your first task is to identify the key to this cipher. You recall the treatise by Johannes de Montevilla, a 13th century Templar chaplain who briefly mentioned a sigillum veritatis, a seal revealing truth only when accompanied by specific liturgical chants. Fringe rumor insists that chanting Te Deum Laudamus backward, while holding a mirror to the script, causes letters to realign into plain text. You hum a backward chant anyway, half in devotion, half in curiosity, just in case the next revelation depends on your vocal performance. That's your first joke. If this code-breaking gig had a Yelp page, your review would note requires karaoke skills. Your candle sputters and you pause, steadying your palm to keep the flame alive. With a new quill, you begin transcribing each symbol into a tabular grid, matching curves to potential letters. You jot side notes. Circle dot might equal O. Or hourglass. Check context. Each line you copy feels like uncoiling ancient rope. Even a single misread symbol could unravel the entire message. At one point, you stop to stretch, cracking your neck as you joke. I never knew cryptography counted as full-body exercise. It's your second joke, an impromptu reward during hours of hunching over parchment. Hours slip by as you test various keys, affine shifts, substitution grids, run-to-Latin transcriptions. Occasionally, you pause to sip tepid wine from a chipped goblet because medieval cryptographers surely needed sustenance. At 2 a.m., you strike gold. The grid realigns to form coherent syllables beneath your quill. In illo tempore, lux, renasci. You read aloud. The parchment unfolds a prophecy claiming that when 3 eclipses cast shadow over Jerusalem's walls, a new guardianship shall rise, suggesting the order foresaw political upheavals centuries on. Mainstream historians debate whether such prophecies were genuine Templar foresight or later insertions by Renaissance scribes eager for mystique. Historians still argue whether these forecasts influenced genuine Crusader ambitions or were merely spiritual allegories. You lean back, exhaustion mingling with adrenaline. The coded lines glimmer on the page, promising hidden truths, hidden, that is, until you deciphered them. You tuck the parchment away and reach for another scroll. This? One crammed with tiny inkblot symbols arranged like constellation charts. A note in the margin reads, Sub umbra de invoco, beneath a sketched star. Fringe circles suggest this is a Templar star map, indicating optimum crusade launch dates. You squint, imagining 1,200-year-old wizard knights adjusting their helmets by starlight instead of sundials. It's too good a mental image not to inspire your third joke. I hope they packed extra celestial GPS batteries. The star map resists your initial grid attempts, so you smudge a bit of candle grease on the parchment, okay? And hold it near the hearth's heat, hoping invisible inks might surface. A few droplets of wax burst the ink, revealing hidden letters that read, write, nocti fracta, hinting at secret nightly ceremonies at fractured ruins. You recall that collapsed crypt under Acre's dusty walls and shiver in the draft. Whether these hidden instructions describe genuine Templar rituals or a later forger's flourish remains contested. Historians still argue whether any of these nighttime rites genuinely persisted beyond whispered rumor, as the first fingers of dawn turn the sky pale. You collect your parchments and arrange them in order of discovery. Each scroll, ciphered tapestry, and marginal doodle contributes to a patchwork of clandestine teachings. One that stretches from Jerusalem's Temple Mount to European cloisters. You close your notebook and extinguish the lantern, the room steeped in candle shadows. Outside, church bells begin their soft chime, calling the faithful to morning prayer. You stand and stretch, the crisp air greeting you as you open the tower window wider. Below, the city stirs in quiet expectation. In your satchel lie half-solved riddles and the tantalizing promise of a new dawn foretold by long-dead knights. Whether these coded manuscripts truly forecast a coming era of guardianship or are relics of devout imagination, you know one thing? The Templars left behind secrets that still demand reckoning. And as you descend the spiral stairs into the waking world, you carry every cipher, crease, and whispered vow in your mind, ready to piece together the order's final truths. You step down a narrow flight of concrete stairs and into a windowless hall whose walls are covered with aged tapestries and medieval banners, repurposed for tonight's clandestine assembly. The air hums with low murmurs and the soft scrape of polished dress shoes. You catch the faint scent of cologne mixed with candle wax, modern and ancient fused into one curious perfume. In the center of the room, a long mahogany table gleams under antique chandeliers retrofitted with LED bulbs. Dark-suited figures swivel in high-backed chairs, their silver Templar crosses glinting under the harsh light. A hush falls as you enter, the clicking of your heel on uneven flagstones sounding unusually loud. You recognize a gray-bearded man, setting a leather-bound tome on the Tabula volume stamped OSMTH. The Ordo Supremus Militaris Templi Hierosolymitani, revived under Napoleon in 1804 to serve charitable causes. Mainstream historians note that since the early 19th century, dozens of groups have adopted Templar names and symbols for philanthropic work, restoring medieval pageantry to modern volunteer efforts. Historians still argue whether these modern orders truly continue the medieval spirit or simply co-opt romantic imagery for social networking. You hover by the back wall, tracing a carved Maltese cross etched into a wooden display case filled with antique helmets and rusted gauntlets. Very artifacts these men and women regard as tangible links to a vanished past. Fringe enthusiasts whisper that a hidden compartment in one helmet contains a fragment of melted-down Templar silver from Akkar's treasury, magically charged to grant protection in battle. You'd chuckle to yourself if your own armor held a secret compartment. You'd fill it with snacks, not sorcery. That's your first joke, softly delivered, so only you can hear. Like a rogue's audition for a sleeping crowd. At one end of the table, a bespectacled woman adjusts her microphone. She announces tonight's topic: the Templar legacy in global governance. A slide clicks to life on a portable projector, showing a world map dotted with red cross, sexically the same symbol stitched on knights' surcoats centuries ago. You feel a thrill at the callback, remembering that first red cross you encountered in Jerusalem's dusty alleys. Now it's on PowerPoint slides, proof that some marks endure beyond time and technology. You lean in to catch her opening line. We're here to debate whether the Templar ethos still guides our modern world order. A hand goes up at the table's center, an impeccably tailored man with a stern jawline. He argues that Templar banking principles survive in today's trust foundations, where donors deposit philanthropic letters of credit across continents, echoes of those pilgrim credit notes you once handled in Akkar's vault. Fringe theorists take it further, suggesting sovereign wealth funds are secretly managed by concealed Templar cabals meeting under disused crypts in Malta. You stifle a laugh. Global finance run like a surprise reunion tour for medieval knights crowdfunding. Crusades? Anyone? That's your second joke, okay? And you admit it's slightly cruel to the trust fund world. A young academic taps her note tablet and responds. While these service-oriented groups resurrect chivalric imagery, no verifiable lineage links them to Jacques de Maul's inner circle. She cites a study showing most modern Templar titles are self-styled honors with no documented medieval chain of command. Historians still argue whether any continuous Templar authority survived the papal bull of 1312, or whether the order was truly extinguished rather than merely dispersed. You drift closer to a display case labeled Knights Symbols Through the Ages. Inside, alongside a gilded cross patty, sits a 19th century silver ring inscribed in hoc signo vinces. A fringe lecturer once claimed these rings were charged with alchemical tinctures that could repel psychic attack. Practical. If you're fighting office politics or actual phantoms, you whisper to yourself, I'd settle for a Templar ring that repels bad Wi-Fi signals. That's your third joke, because signal strength definitely feels like a modern spiritual battle. Suddenly, the room darkens as the projector shifts to an image of a clandestine. Handshake, two gauntlet hands clasping beneath a broken sword. The presenter explains that Masonic rites borrowed elements from Templar initiation ceremonies, an echo of that cryptic vow you recited under candle flicker. She notes that modern lodges sometimes reenact a simplified version of the investiture ritual, minus the blood oath, but complete with black hooded dramatics. Historians still argue whether speculative Freemasonry intentionally preserved Templar mysteries or inadvertently reimagined them through Enlightenment lenses. You shiver at the memory of that subterranean crypt and the rasp of the Grand Master's voice. A murmur ripples as another silhouette stanza, former diplomat turned Templar knight who now champions humanitarian missions in Africa. He holds up a loaf of flatbread, baked according to medieval recipe, declaring it a symbol of service to the poor, echoing the order's charitable roots. You lean forward, imagining the early brothers breaking similar bread in shadowed chapels. His gesture bridges centuries, turning legend into volunteer soup kitchens. Across the table, a retired military officer insists that the Templar doctrine of unwavering bravery still informs some special operations training programs, citing a 2018 exercise codenamed Operation Temple Shield in Cyprus. Senior generals lauded its symbolic nod to fortitude under siege. Whether such nods are sincere homage or corporate branding remains debated. Historians still argue if any modern army has truly adopted Templar martial ethics beyond ceremonial fanfare. You sink into a chair as the meeting adjourns. Figures stand in clusters, exchanging embossed business cards and quietly whispering addresses of upcoming gatherings under castle ruins. You slip out onto a narrow side street, lantern glow flickering through the conference windows behind you. The hush of the night welcomes you, street lamps glinting off rain-slick cobbles. You pause beneath a carved cross above the doorway, recalling every cross you've seen, embroidered on a surcoat, etched in cloister stone, stamped on prescribed pamphlets, and now shining on lapels of modern knights. That red cross has traveled through time like a stubborn ember, sometimes fading, sometimes raging. Whether it truly guides secret gatherings in corporate boardrooms or simply inspires charitable suits, you feel its echo wash across your skin. You straighten your coat collar and slip your hand inside the pocket of your surcoat for one final callback. The small lead seal you lifted entire still rests there, its chalice emblem peeking from folded parchment. It reminds you that history is never fully buried. It surfaces in hidden meetings, coded texts, and the quiet faith of those who gather under ancient symbols. A distant church bell tolls the hour. You taste the cool night air on your tongue, a hint of promise or perhaps a warning that time's currents swirl beneath modern calm. Whether the Templar legacy belongs to living orders marching in suit jackets or only to dusty archives waiting for dreamers, you realize the order's ghost endures wherever hearts still yearn for purpose. The night air feels velvety as you trudge away from secret conclaves and fading torchlight, each step softer than the last. Cool breezes sigh through quiet streets, carrying faint echoes of chants and coded whispers that once filled cloistered halls. In the gentle hush, the weight of centuries slips from your shoulders like a heavy cloak cast aside at a sanctuary. You taste distant incense on a passing breeze, memory of candlelit chapels deep underground mingled with the sweet promise of dew-kissed dawn. Each inhalation reminds you that history is alive in the smallest breaths, in the crease of a tattered manuscript, and in the hush between recorded facts and whispered legends. Your heart slows to the cadence of your footsteps, matching the rhythm of ancient drums long silent beneath the stones. The world around you brightens as street lamps give way to pale horizon, light golden and forgiving. The hush of sleep beckons, soft as a linen mantle drawn snug against the skin. You feel your own pulses, an intimate lullaby humming through. Your veins know that the Templar story continues in coded ciphers tucked in dusty corners, in charitable missions that echo bygone vows, and in the quiet resolve of souls who still search for meaning beyond the tangible. Rest now, assured that these secret teachings, whether mystical or metaphor, have found a home within you, etched beneath your ribs like hidden script upon vellum. As your eyelids grow heavy, let the candle's last flicker dissolve. Imagine white-cloaked figures at silent watch, guardians of memory in shadows beyond sight. Surrender to the gentle pull of slumber, secure in the knowledge that every mystery you carry will softly unfold in dreams. End of script. Sweet dreams.